Hello, welcome to this tutorial on how to draft an iconic 1951 Balenciaga coat. I'm talking about this one. You probably would have all seen it. It looks absolutely amazing. But the amazing thing is, once you know how it works, it's really easy to draft. So I'm going to analyze it first and see how it's actually made up of. And then I'm actually going to show you how you can draft this from just a few measurements. We don't even need a block from this. This is basically based on a classic T-bar kimono shape, and then lots of volume is added. So it's a really clever adaptation of a very classic historical pattern cutting style. So I'm going to switch the camera over and we can have a look at this style in detail. Images I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to also get my sketchbook ready. So you can see there are three different versions of it. Two on the right are from the Museum of Fit, and the other one is actually from a historical photograph. And on the Museum of Fit one, if you zoom into them, you can quite clearly see how it actually looks like. So I'm gonna zoom in there so we can see all the seams quite clearly. So you can see this, it's actually like a really deep V shape. And at the front, the back looks like a normal neck, maybe cut a little bit wider. And then you can see there's a seam actually running all down the top shoulder and down the sleeve. And then you can see the sleeve also has an underarm seam. And that's what's really interesting as well. It's got like a slit to the side. So it's slit to the waist. I mean, you can also see it on the historical one. It's basically slit to the waist. So that's why I think the original description calls it a mantle. So it's like an over mantle. It's not a coat which is closed. It's something you wear on top of something. And then you can see it's a very long coat. And if you zoom in on the front one, you can see how the hem is actually finished. Can you see how it has got, you can actually see it must have been turned up twice, and it's over time gone slightly wrinkly. But with these facts, we can then work out how this coat was made. And hello everybody, just feel free to say hello in the chat. Hello Rafi, and Rafi's saying it's absolutely beautiful, and I agree with you. And this is like real Balenciaga, unlike the modern Balenciaga. I think the modern Balenciaga is trying to do something else. I think this is the interesting stuff, and I also think this is stuff where you can sort of use details and make them your own quite easily, and it'll become very wearable. So this style, you could try it maybe in a jersey, on just a normal t-shirt. If you had that, for example, just on the sleeves, it'd be a really nice drapey detail in a very soft viscose or silk jersey. You could make a coat like that. You could make it of different fabrics. You could add just a few of the pleats if you don't want to have the full look, but all of them will be quite stunning. And hello Effie, hello to Corfu. Oh, I don't think you've joined me live before. And yes, hello from the UK. I've just had my lunch, so let's have a look at some beautiful Balenciaga. Okay. We should now have my sketchbook. Let's try to find an empty page. There we go. So that's a bit better. Okay. Oh, hello Ursula. Ursula's saying it's a reptile sleeve. Yes, it's a little bit like it has that sort of like a it has that sort of folds you get on some sort of chameleon or something, isn't it? Maybe we can find a slightly nicer name. Unless, of course, you love her. If you love reptiles, if you're a fan, then you right up your street. So what this what this coat, and especially this sleeve, is actually shoulder and the coat. Actually, I'm gonna get the front one as well again. It's gonna be too big now. So I got this really fancy technology, but of course it has its other issues at times. So let's start with the front first. So we can see, so you can really see how it is, like it's just got a normal back neck, and I think it's cut slightly wider. On the historical photos, they've actually done it tighter to the neckline, and I'm not quite sure the center front could be, that's why I'm drawing it really badly, it could be either like slightly curved like that and then going straight, or it might be completely straight. That's up to you as well. And then of course I think actually might be completely straight, and we can talk about when we draft the pattern. And then this is sort of your natural waist, and then what we've basically got is pretty much, if we zoom in a bit, you can see pretty much from the neckline we got these pleats, and they're quite deep. So we got one pleat there, and then of course from underneath we got the second pleat, and on the actual sort of what I would call the shoulder, by the look of it, we've got 4 pleats. And if you know that, you can sort of then say, ooh, my shoulder, I think this is a slightly dropped shoulder. If your shoulder was, let me have a look how my shoulder is. So my shoulder on the full scale would be 14 centimeters. So if you want to drop it a little bit, you might move it up to 16, and then 16 divided by 4, it would be roughly a depth of 4. But of course that is up to you again. And so roughly saying in black, this coat would look absolutely terrifying with dark. Yes, it would. It would. It's sort of like the skeleton as well, as a sort of like an insect, a reptile. But I think that's why it stayed so absolutely modern and timeless. Well, it's still avant-garde, isn't it? It's sort of contemporary, it's classic. I think it also looks quite historical. It has a sort of you can maybe imagine on a medieval. You can it's a sort of a bit of maybe Tudor, but you get these sort of layers of fabric, so you can have lots of fun with it and style how you want to. Imagine in an organza as well, so it's like see-through. That'd be quite amazing. So that's sort of our bodice. And then of course, if you have a really wide piece of fabric, what you could do is actually, all you do is you continue your pleats, but they then become part of the sleeve. And we can count, let's count how many we have. So I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. One more. And then these are completely straight pleats, but because of when you move your arms, that's when you get that sort of skeleton waterfall effect. So does it finish on a pleat? Yes, it does. And interestingly, it finishes on the inside on the pleat. So it gives you that sort of, basically the facing is the inside of the last pleat. So it's quite clever. And then of course, 1, 2, 3, 4, it is completely straight on the top, on the underside and the side seam. And can you see how in theory you could cut it out of one piece, but you would end up with a pattern piece which is roughly that shape, which is massive. So what I've seen it on the Museum at Fit, they actually got some more photos of it in the gallery, and there you can actually see that it has a seam there. And I think that's purely to make it easier to cut and construct. Because that way you can more or less have rectangles. And hello sign up, and sign up is saying hello. The pleats appear to have a heavy look, maybe suited for broad shoulder build. Yeah, I think it's always, if I show you the other photo I have, this one. So I think, and the original was a very famous Vogue photo. They were very tall. So yes, I think if you're tall and broad shoulder, it's probably perfect. But as Ursula is saying, if you have very broad shoulders, they would accentuate it. So if you actually have quite rounded shoulders, it look quite nice as well. But I think like on her, I would imagine she is the usual model height. I mean, it looks quite stunning. But for example, if I do stuff which is too broad shouldered, or to accentuate the shoulders too much, because I've got quite athletic shoulders for my build, this would probably not suit me. So I probably wouldn't make the whole style for me. I would probably either just have a few of them. So I would probably finish, either just have a 3 at the top, or I might just have it on part of my sleeve, and maybe doing a softer fabric as well. So this is sort of where you have to work out, you know, what works for you. This is quite, you know, if you make that, it looks amazing, but it's not a sort of subtle daytime look, is it? That's the beauty of, once you learn how to pattern cut the most iconic garments, the most avant-garde garments, then you can make anything from it, whether it's the same garment or whether it's something a lot more toned down. But if you only learn how to draft the toned down version, it's much harder to actually scale it up to its full sculptural impact. So this is the basic principle. So in theory, what we could do is literally that you have a square for our bodice, and then we have a square for our sleeve, like this. And then for the back, and you literally, the front and the back are basically the same. So, but the back will have a neckline like this, and then the front would have, I think I've drawn it wrongly. I think the front has a neckline maybe like this, but it's up to you as well. And then of course from the check, I think it goes maybe from the waist down is open. And Rafi is saying, would it be possible to hide an armhole in one of the pleats and then stitch in a classic sleeve? Yes, you could definitely. So the 4th sleeve, so that really, this sleeve I've drawn it slightly wrong. I think that actually goes sort of just on top of your shoulder. So if you stitch that in, you could put a classic sleeve in there, and it would sort of grow out of nothing. And it becomes quite a 1940s as well, that sort of shoulder, where it always looks like the sleeve is stitched in. And the magic for this style is that you have marked your pleats, and then what they've done, and again it actually tells you on the Museum of Fit, and I was wondering about it beforehand, they've stitched it to a cotton tape, because you got your seam here, but then it's each, rather than the pleat, if I get a piece of fabric, actually if I get a piece of paper, if you pleated it, we got the seam, so you can, in theory, you can basically, there the seam is, so I'm just going to draw in with a pen. There the seam is, you could just basically, you stitch it together like that, and then you could just catch it where the seam is and just hand tack it. But if you put a tape underneath, you'd probably choose a tape this width, like wide enough. What you can do is when you sort of mount your pleats on it, and then basically the pit of each pleat, or the trench, or whatever you want to call it, which is down here, I would imagine that's actually stitched like this. So it's stitched like that, either by hand You can just could just hand tack it, for example, here and here, and then just do like a hand tack like that. But that way, it actually holds it in place. And you can sort of see how it doesn't wobble. It's literally, just by making it a little bit wider, it will hold it in place and sort of give it that sculptural edge, because it's not all pointy, it's a little bit broader. We've got some more question. It has a seam. It has a seam along the length of the sleeve. Yeah, so Effie is saying, has it got a seam along the length of the sleeve? And yes, it has. If I zoom into our photo again. And that's actually, can you see? There's a seam there. And we will continue up in the shoulder. And if I show you the one of on the person, whether it's because it's so old, whether it's been, you know, like touched up, or it's a photograph, on the photo it looks like it hasn't got a seam. So there might, that's why you always think, oh yeah, it's just been pushed up. So until I only saw the museum at Fit one recently, and until I saw that and saw the seam, it looks a lot more complicated. But as soon as you see the seam, you think, yeah, that's where you can mount it quite easily. Because of course you could still do the same mounting here, but because you haven't got a seam there, you have to be very careful on how you lay it on. But I find fascinating about this image, I do wonder whether this is like a, you know, they do they shoot the pieces for the collection. They must, even in the 1950s, probably slightly less of an industry than now. But I wonder whether this is like a pure showpiece, because it looks like the lower, it looks like the sleeves, the pleats at different depths. So I wonder on this photo whether it's actually just stitched on here at the shoulder, at the top, because they look symmetrical right to where the top of your armhole would be. And then it looks like the pleat sleeves themselves are quite irregular. So it could be that they hadn't stitched it on, or they've done it more irregular, and then when it came to actually selling the coat and making it, they then actually stitched it all together and added that top seam. The nice thing is, Effie, that if you decide, you can actually do it with or without the seam. So I'm going to now show you how to draft the pattern. I'm going to do teeny tiny, but I'm going to show you the process on how you would do it. So to start drafting this pattern, let's make it a bit smaller so you can actually see it. I'm going to move this over here. There we go. So, okay. To draft this 1951 Balenciaga coat, you only need to draft half of either the front or back, because the front and back are identical. So what you actually start off with is drawing in a line which is both your center front and your center back, and that needs to be the length of the whole coat. On that coat, we're then going to mark half the back neck width, or however wide you want it. So you can go with the width on your basic bodice block. You could choose a garment you like. It's sort of up to you. So you mark the half your back neck width. Now we're going to draw on the shoulder. At its most basic, we could just draw it as a complete T shape, so like a classic Japanese kimono. However, I think this is done at a slight angle from what I've seen at Museum at Fit. So what I'm going to do is, what I would do is basically angle it slightly. And again, you can use, if you have a block, you can use the shoulder slope for that, or Alternatively, if you have a garment, you know, like a coat, you want to roughly copy the fit of, you could lay it on top and again copy the angle of that. Like this. On that line, you need to mark your shoulder width. However, we're gonna have 1, 2, 3, 4 pleats on the shoulder. So you have to, you can either pleat the whole shoulder, which I think the pleats on the original are slightly less deep. So for example, if you have 16 centimeter shoulder, you divide it by 4, so 4 centimeter would be the maximum depth. But I would probably do it something like take away 1 centimeter. So then you have you can have a pleat depth of 3 centimeters, which means you have 4 pleats times double that. So 4 times 6, so that'd be 24 centimeters extra. But you basically have your shoulder width. This is always tricky because if I do it on just generals, it becomes quite abstract. But if you then do measurements, it becomes a bit too specific. So the shoulder width plus 4 times your pleats. And of course your pleats is the depth plus back. So if your pleat is 1 centimeters, it would be 1 and 1. So 2 times 4 is 8. But you mark what you find a width is on it. And I wouldn't mark my pleats on there. I would make them on the trowel or on yourself, or you can sort of mark it roughly. But what we want to do is the last pleat, you want to sort of you want to have this is basically, if you want to hide the seam, you can use this as the pitch of one of your pleats. So we might sort of just add the amount we want, but then we can move our pleats around and it might sort of go over our seam. But then I think you can either then cut it as a complete square, or what I think the Balenciaga one is, if you zoom in a little bit on the side picture, just trying to find the one where we can see the, I think it's got a slight angle. Oh, I can't see it on there either. Again, there was one more photo on the Museum at Fit, which wasn't very clear, so I didn't grab that. I think, oh, you can still see it here. I think it might be a slight angle, but you know, that's actually completely up to you. It also depends on the fabric you want to. The nice thing is if you have everything completely straight of grain, and if it will fall beautifully. And then of course what you need to mark on here, if you want to copy it, you would also mark your waist, because your waist is the point where you stop stitching it together and it becomes open. The next thing you want to decide on is the depth of your sleeve. So that is quite a big sleeve. So if you have your basic sleeve, I would probably lower it quite a lot. Again, this is up to you. If you have, for example, if you have a coat you really love and it's got a really nice deep armhole, you can just copy that. Alternatively, I would probably go down a minimum of 5 centimeters from your armhole, which is about minimum of 2 inches. And then you can literally measure the distance from here to here. So on your block or on your garment, you can put a ruler, and when you measure this distance to your shoulder, or if you have a sleeve block, for example, on the bicep line, you can fold it in half and then add the measurement you want. And then this, I would probably do it at a right angle. You can either do it at a right angle, or you can make it parallel to your top line. It's sort of up to you. if you do it this way, it becomes a parallel sleeve. But I think what's beautiful about this is that this goes narrow. So I would actually do it at a right angle, which then, if I continue across the page, can you see, it becomes narrower and narrower, and that will give you the look. And again, what you do is you do your sleeve, desired sleeve length, plus, so in their case it looks like it's a 3/4 length. So again, that's just below the elbow, so it's up to you how you do that, or you have to measure it on yourself. And so you measure from, you don't want to measure from your original shoulder point. You sort of, if you made your shoulder wider on your blocks, then you need to measure from that point, of course. So if you, the easiest way to actually do this is to already, if you have a coat or something, because then you can measure the shoulder width from that, and you can measure the sleeve length of that, if it's a relaxed style, for example. Or you can literally just hold on a piece of fabric on yourself and see, oh, that's too overly broad, so that's exactly the width I want. So again, this is a sleeve length, plus the original has should have 7 pleats. So in this case, you would 7 the pleats times the pleats, and we have the same as above, and it's a depth plus the back. What you will have to work out, what they've done quite clever on this, is that the last pleat is only half a pleat, and then they used probably the turn up as facing. So the last pleat, rather than going up and down and up, it actually just goes up, and then it stays like that. And when it's stitched to a tape, so it stays in effect. But that gives you a sort of really 3D effect. So that's actually all it is. So what you end up with is a pattern piece like that and a pattern piece like that. And then you can use those. You can definitely use this for the front and the back. So you would actually just cut 4 of those, or 2 pairs. And then what you do on the bodice part for the back, you would, again, you could copy the neckline of an existing garment, the one you measured, and draw it in, and that's your back. And then your front could either be a V-neck, a V shape like that. You can actually extend it all the way down. You can curve it like this. So there's lots of options on how you could finish it off. So you could, if you wanted to have it sort of slightly more swingy, you could have it like that. Just follow your basic V neckline, and then you add the same amount to the other side, and you do that to the back, of course, as well. And that's your most basic pattern. And then you add seam allowance to everything, apart to your center back. So on here, for the front, you would cut out 1 pair again, which is the red. And then for the back, the same pattern piece is also your back, but then it would be 1 on the fold. But that's the great thing about pattern cutting, something as oversized as this, that you literally get away with 1 pattern piece. And you can make the whole coat like that from your measurements, or using measurements from existing garments or your blocks to make sure it has the fit you want. And then the question somebody earlier asked, and where it has the top seam. So the original, there's 2 examples. The one in the museum at Fit definitely has that top seam there, which will help you stitch it onto the tape as well. Because this coat along here, the pleats, when you put them together, you then stitch them onto a tape slightly either side to the seam. So I would probably do it 1 inch wide, so 3 centimeters, 2 to 3 centimeters wide, and that will just anchor it a bit, because if you only have it stitched at the actual seam, well, it's always hard to do paper, but it basically will start, I think, twisting, because it's only held along basically a few stitches. But if you mount it on a tape, that will basically really stabilize it and make sure it sort of runs down the top of your shoulder. So that's a really easy and clever way of giving a bit of structure, and especially using like a nice stable cotton tape for that. If you don't want to have a seam, and the original image from that time looks like it hasn't got a seam, but that also looks like it's not stitched equally, so I'm not quite sure what's going on there. But if you didn't want to have a seam, I think you could easily make this without a seam. If you want to be really clever, depending how big your fabric is, you can actually, I need another color, I'm going to do black. You could make this a fold line, yeah. In which case you only would cut out one pair. And then if you wanted to be really clever, you could actually have this on the fold. On this, if you wanted to have this on the fold, I wouldn't then have a shoulder angle. I would have it coming out straight. And then you can easily have it on the fold. And then what you basically end up with is your classic Japanese kimono pattern. You sometimes probably seen them, where it's literally your body looks like this. So that is your shoulder, your center back. And I've noticed that my front bigger than my back, sorry. So that would be your bodice, and then you just cut your sleeves. You could cut the sleeves. I would cut them out at an angle, because I think that gives it its sort of skeleton reptile look, where there is a trapeze shape. And then again you have the fold there. But can you see, we could then, you know, you could really make that more or less a zero waist pattern if you wanted to. However, because this is actually going to be a massive pattern piece, so you need the Japanese kimonos were always sort of, it's quite a narrow width cloth, so that makes it really beautiful, because when the cloth is woven as the kimono is cut, or the kimono is cut to suit the cloth. And on this one, if you think about, if you, for example, I'm just going to do my basic width as a sort of normal one. So 740 plus 20 is 50. I think you would need the full width, more or less, of a sort of a standard width European fabric, which is 140 centimeters. That's the same in UK. I think in the US it's your classic, so it's about 1.5 yards wide. That's how far my imperial skills last. But that's how easy it is to actually draft it. And what I would do is I would literally just make out of, you know, an old sheet or something like fabric. You don't even need to cut it up. You could just sort of drape it on, stitch it together, and then on yourself or on the mannequin, I would work out exactly where I want these pleats to hit, because you want one pleat sort of go over that seam and one pleat over the end. So you might have to shift everything down slightly, and you might actually find out, oh, you know, the pleats need to be slightly deeper or slightly narrower for it to work for me. But that's how you actually draft this really beautiful Balenciaga coat. If you make it, I would love to see it. And as I said before, you can have lots of fun with this style, just depending on which fabric choice you use and stuff like that, and whether you just do a shoulder and then do a satin sleeve as suggested, whether you do the whole thing, or whether you just do the arm. So just imagine if you just did a normal garment, for example, and then you set a few of the pleats down here, or you made the whole thing, but you made it out of a, for example, if you have really flowy silk, then it look a lot less sculptural. It would just have lots of volume, but it will sort of swirl around your body, so it become more, maybe a bit more 70s then. So you can have lots of fun with how you want to interpret. You could go do the full on one in this fabric, or you could use Again, if you use like a thin but quite not stiffish, but a silk with a little bit of body, again, it looked completely different. It looked quite sculptural, but slightly airier than this. So there's lots of options. What's nice as well, this really high side seam opening, it is like a mantle, something you just throw on. And I would probably maybe even wear it with a belt, because if you look how they've styled it on this image, you know how I know it's her arm, but you can imagine just having a belt around the front, and then you can actually, if your slit goes all the way up to your waist, you could then feed your belt through, so it doesn't go around the back, it goes on your body at the back rather than the coat. So you have the flowing back, and then the front is belted in, so you have lots of fun with that as well. So it's, again, the great thing about this is you learn one method for making this like iconic historic garment, and then you can experiment and make it exactly to suit you, whether you make it little or big, you know, change it to work for you. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this analysis and tutorial, and I'll be back in 2 weeks, and I'll be looking at a 1940s pattern envelope somebody bought and it didn't have the pattern pieces in. So we're gonna look at how you can work out how to draft an extra garment if you only have a pattern envelope and it might not be available to buy, but you love illustrations and you can use the pattern pieces to help you make your drafting choices. But that's it for me today. Have a lovely Thursday, everybody. Bye.